glad you guys are here. I hope, but finals didn't start today, right? They start tomorrow. So today's a study day. This is good. You kind of carbo load before you start the press into finals. So this is our last main campus lunch and learn session for this semester. We actually have another one up at the Center City campus tomorrow. If you're interested, Mike Dugan from UWC will be up there at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Very interesting. We didn't plan it this way, but our guest speakers are both life science oriented. And you don't have to be a life science major to get in life science consulting. They have lots of opportunities out there for bright business students as well. So we're very excited that we've got Michael here today. CS Consulting is a firm that's been around about 30 years, heavy focus in life sciences. Here in the Philadelphia area, no surprise, a lot of focus on pharmaceuticals. And Mike and his team, he's the managing principal. The Philadelphia office, basically, he's the top dog that runs it. Do a lot of work with area firms. And he's happy to come in today to share a little bit of his experience in consulting, a little bit of what their firm does, but most importantly, because this is a lunch chat, right? This is, and we're providing the lunch, but you guys are going to have to provide the chat at this point, okay? So, and I told them we have very smart, very inquisitive students at the Fox School of Business and at Temple University, and so you guys are going to drive a lot of the conversation that goes on today, right? So I expect all of you to jump in between mouthfuls of pizza. There is lots of pizza. Please feel free to get some more over the course of the discussion. It's going to be informal. It's going to be relaxed. And with that, I'm going to hand off to Michael again. Thank you so much for your time. Why don't we welcome him with a round of applause. Thank you.
Excellent. So I'll probably stand here because I saw you move the camera facing this way, but I might move around a little bit. And I think it's a great introduction and appreciate the opportunity to be here. Have spoken at a lot of different campuses for a lot of different events, and for me, I think the best and most productive use of the time for you guys is to allow you to ask a lot of questions, maybe dispel a lot of myths that are floating around in your head, thinking about careers in consulting. What does it mean? What are some experiences like? So I thought what I would do is maybe give a little bit of an introduction to myself, how my career has played out, leading up to today. And then we can kind of take it in a number of different directions in terms of the questions that you guys have, okay? So as we get in, just a quick show of hands, how many folks are in the undergraduate school? Okay, and how about the graduate school? Okay, excellent. And how many outside of business? Anyone? All in the business school? Okay, excellent. And how many folks are in the room have already gone through the interview process and have jobs lined up? Yeah, okay, excellent, good. So a good mix of folks. So by means of introduction, again, the couple of sort of important highlights for me over the course of my career. So I am a longtime native of the Philadelphia area. Both my wife and I grew up in the Philadelphia suburbs, still live out there. We've really only strayed from the Philadelphia area for undergrad. So I did my undergrad at University of Maryland in College Park. Had a really strong desire to be on the business side of things. Never really had much of a career just outside of business, but again, didn't really know what that meant, right? Like many people going into undergrad, it's one where you think that you want to, probably for me at least, set myself up on sort of a very flexible path, because at 18 years old, if somebody stands up and says, I know exactly what I'm going to do, more power to you, that's awesome. But you're also probably in the minority, right? Because we don't always know. And so as I went through my undergraduate career, I focused on business. I focused across a variety of things. And for me, it was really important just to get a broad view of the world, right? And so I took a number of classes outside of business, took some random things that were just of interest. Hopefully you guys are doing that and making the best use of the amazing curriculum here at Temple. And so on the business side, though, I was in undergrad, I was a marketing major, but didn't really necessarily want to be a marketer and wanted to separate myself a little bit. So I took a second major in what I think it was called transportation and logistics, but in essence it was supply chain management. So I got a little bit of a mix of things and wound up applying for jobs in consulting. And I was looking at, I guess what many people call sort of general consulting. So at the time, this was in the late 90s. So at the time it was, the Deloitte's, Accenture's, although they were Anderson Consulting at the time, right, pre-Enron days. And all of those types of consulting firms. And ultimately I took a job with Deloitte Consulting. And so I came out of undergrad very excited to kind of see the world of consulting and the world of business and get a well-rounded sort of education in the business world that would allow me sort of a stepping stone. And when I think about back in those days, and probably in your shoes as well, consulting is also an incredible opportunity as a career stepping stone. Most people will view it that way. A lot of people will join a firm specifically to get a sort of broad view, multiple projects, different industries, different practice areas, whatever it might be, ultimately to figure out their next step and path. Certainly there is nothing wrong with that. I'll describe a little bit about, more about what we do at ZS when I get there in a little bit and how we think about sort of that process. But I think what you'll find is most consulting firms, Deloitte as well, ZS as well, that, that's okay, right? We have a lot of people that come into consulting that want to use it to better themselves along their career path to a different type of career. That's a model with some consulting firms. For me, I wasn't quite sure. And a lot of people also talk about general consulting as an opportunity to see a lot of industries and do a lot of different things. What you do find, to be fair though, is that because everybody in this room is probably a very bright student, very academically oriented, very successful in what you do. When you take that first role, like for me, my first project was in healthcare. And I worked with a partner and a group of people that after that project was done, they said, hey, we want you to keep working on our projects. And then all of a sudden, 4 years later, I'm a pharma guy, right? So that's sort of how I wound up in healthcare and pharmaceutical related consulting or life sciences, as we tend to call it, just to keep it the breadth of what we do. And so I worked at Deloitte for about a little over 4 years. And most of my time, like I said, was focused on the life sciences. I was out at the Philadelphia office here downtown for Deloitte. Spent a good bit of time traveling. I was, in the model where it was sort of sell a project that was out Monday, back Thursday or Friday, and sort of in the office that last day. And I worked with a number of different pharmaceutical companies. But for me, the work that I did at Deloitte was really foundational for a number of reasons. Not because of necessarily the impact that we were having with the clients. That's sort of critical and sort of a baseline for success. But for me personally, it taught me a lot of really, really interesting things about myself, about consulting, about what I wanted to do long term. Okay? And a lot of that stems from the fact that I was staffed on projects where they were longer term projects with smaller startup-based organizations. Okay? And so I had the opportunity to go into a pharma company. There were only about 25 people on the client side. And we wound up ultimately selling work that brought in, I think, about 27 consultants, right? So we were actually outnumbering their organization. And we were split up by function. So we had functions like supply chain, technology, contract management, sales, marketing, pretty much everything that you can imagine goes on within the context of a pharmaceutical organization. And we help them build their organization almost from the ground up. Processes, systems, tools, everything that goes on other than things like R&D, which was where they were focused. Because a pharma company, for those if you're not familiar with pharmaceuticals, for pharma companies there's a couple of key elements to it. But I would really break it down to research and development, right? So when we have a clinical asset that we're looking at, how does a pharma company basically develop and test that pharmaceutical product so that it goes through all of the FDA requirements from clinical trials and through the development process. And then there's the sales and marketing piece of it, right? Now, of course, it's underselling a pharmaceutical organization because there's a lot that goes into it. But those three key things are really what help to commercialize a product and make it successful in the market. And so my focus was much more on the commercial side. That's where I was getting this experience, coupled with this organizational dynamics, right? Understanding that even with 30 people, that there can be a lot of politics, right? You're a partner to them as a consultant, so you're not necessarily part of their organization, but in that type of project, you're so well entrenched in everything that they do that you feel a lot of the weight of being a part of their organization, helping them build their organization and become successful. And so for me, that project and then future projects while I was at Deloitte were really important because what I learned about myself is that I really enjoy the consulting process. I really enjoy the relationship development that comes with it. I enjoy that segment of smaller to mid-sized firms where we're really trying to help them build the organization up. And I have a number of more examples that I can share with you on that front. I enjoy a lot of what goes into the selling of consulting projects. Happy to kind of share some stories there as well. The delivery and driving sort of quality and execution so that we make sure that not only are we doing everything that we're supposed to, but we're doing the right thing for the client organization. And so that was really a lot what was going on in my head. And as I got to about the fourth or so year, I started thinking about where I was going, and I started to look at business school as an opportunity for me. And so I applied to a number of business schools. I wound up doing my MBA program full-time at Wharton over at University of Pennsylvania. And so I was in that for 2 years, and during the course of my time at Wharton, again, I sort of went through this personal exploration of what do I want to do? You know, and I looked at things like commercial real estate development, marketing, pharmaceuticals on the sort of client side. I looked at other consulting firms. And ultimately, I sort of realized that all of this exploration outside of consulting was me sort of running away from what I was most passionate about. And that went back to that consulting process, right? And so for me, having grown up in life sciences consulting, basically, I became aware of ZS, talked to a lot of folks, was really intrigued, was intrigued by a couple things. One was the size of the firm, the opportunity for growth and being a part of that growth. And so as I looked at it, I was really interested, but I also had a non-compete because at the time Deloitte was going to theoretically pay my tuition back. So that was part of my story. So I wound up as my internship in between my 2 years going back to Deloitte. And maybe kind of feel a little bit that, you know, it would have been nice to do something totally different. Maybe I should have. But in the world of everything happens for a reason, the first project that I wound up in that summer was also in life sciences, but it was much more on the sales and marketing side. Right, so it was starting to look away from sort of, you know, in the late 90s, everything was technology oriented, right? Everybody was looking at, you know, things like the Y2K issue, if you guys have read about that, which is now probably history, right? You know, big software packages that were going to solve every function that a company had, like, you know, the PeopleSofts and SAPs of the world. And that was really the focus. So coming out of undergrad, everybody did technology-based work like that. And so, you know, as I was going back to Deloitte for that summer in between my MBA, I wound up on a project that was much more focused on sales and marketing. So it was looking at, you know, what customer segmentation looks like, you know, why certain customers act the way they do, how a customer, which in healthcare is very different, right? The customer of a pharmaceutical company, their focus is on the patient, but their customer in many cases is the doctors, right? Which is a real interesting separation of the customer versus the actual end user of a product, right? And when you combine that with the regulatory environment, that world of promotional marketing and sales was very interesting. And all the analytics that sit behind it to help foster the right decision making for a company was what I was involved in. And it became very clear to me that I wanted to go back to ZS and talk a lot more about what they do. Okay, so I came back to Wharton my second year, started that conversation, ultimately really fell in love with a lot of things about ZS, including most specifically the culture and the people. And so I joined ZS. We didn't have a Philadelphia office at the time. This was in 2004. And so I joined our Princeton office, which was at the time our biggest office other than our headquarters in Evanston. And so let me paint a little bit of a picture of what ZS is, and then I'll talk a little bit about my role evolution, and then we'll get into some of your specific questions and maybe some examples of experiences of that. So ZS is a firm that back in 2004 when I joined was about 550 people in 11 offices globally. 13 and a half, I guess, years later now, we are about 5,000 people in 22 offices. About 2,500 to 3,000 of those people are now in 2 offices in India. We can share a little bit more about that in a little bit. So that ideal state of being a part of the fabric of growth, I think I can check that box off, right? I mean, we have really grown. But the nice thing when I talk about the culture of who ZS is that we are a partnership, like many consulting firms, We don't have shareholders other than ourselves as partners. And so the benefit of that is that we really are focused on doing what is right by our clients and doing what is right by our people. And so that growth has been very organic. That growth has also been focused on steady and stable, sustainable growth, right? So if you look at our history, we were founded in 1983 by the Z&S, and since 1983 we have grown double-digit growth and low double-digit growth and very purposeful growth every year for the past almost 35 years, right? And so if you ask that of, as an ideal state of almost any other company in the world, they would be thrilled to have that, right? And it's part of something that we're very proud of. We're not trying to grow 100% in any given year because it becomes unsustainable, right? And in a consulting model, the growth comes from the hiring of talent, right? People are our asset. We have some tools, we have some things we license, but the people are our asset. So if you grow too fast and demand softens, then you have a people problem. If you don't grow fast enough, you have a people problem, and you don't have enough demand, enough people and resources to meet the demand that's out there. So you have to really hit that sweet spot, and you have to spend a lot of time focusing on it, which is what we do at a management and leadership level. Okay. So back to a little bit about more about ZS. So we are focused heavily on our core values and our culture. As you guys have probably been through some of the recruiting process, and you will continue. Every consulting firm will talk to you about their culture, right? We do as well. What I tell people is that it's very hard because you don't know for sure whether somebody's blowing smoke or whether they're being real until you enter the space, until you step foot over that threshold and you're a part of the culture. Do you really get a great sense of what it is? So you really, as you go through that recruiting process, it's important to talk to a lot of people. Get a feeling. Are they people that you would want to sit across from, late at night working on a really intense project, right? Are these the type of people that you can respect their individual sort of differences and the diversity that they bring to the table? And so at ZS, when I joined, I kind of thought, I met all these great people. I thought I was going to come in and be one of many consultants with life sciences experience, right? And what I found is that I was actually a little bit of the oddball, right? I was sort of in the minority from my experience. And what I've learned very quickly and have learned and continued to have reinforced to me over the past, nearly decade and a half is that the diversity that we have of people's experiences is what makes us so good at what we do, right? So we were talking about, some bioengineering and engineering schools and other science disciplines, mathematics, statistics, computer science. All of these are the types of disciplines that come into ZS, not just from the business school. Okay? And so for me, what I find most intriguing is that in any given day, I can step into the office of our managing directors, our CEO, other senior partners, and have amazing discussions with incredibly smart people that teach me an enormous amount. But I can also sit side by side with our most junior associate and learn an equal amount, right? And that is something that is really, really incredible, and something that at ZS we take very seriously, because not only do we have that, but you really only get the benefit of that if you actually do it, if you're a part of it, and if you're a part of giving that back, right? And so when somebody wants to set up time with me to learn about what I do and my experiences, you have to be willing to, in as busy of a schedule as consultants have, you have to be willing to put that time out. You have to be willing to collaborate with others on difficult problems that they have, even if it's not your own space. And so that's a lot of what goes on in our culture. We're a very open culture. We're a very collaborative culture. Everything is, like most businesses now, done in teams. And I think that's something that we really pride ourselves on, and something that we really value. And it makes us, like I said, good at what we do, right? Because when I go to my clients, right, let's maybe start to get a little bit more specific about what we do. When I go to my clients, okay, and so on our East Coast, we have offices on the East Coast in Toronto, Boston, New York, Princeton, Philadelphia. And most of them are pretty much heavily focused, if not almost exclusively, in pharma because of the healthcare spin on the East Coast of the U.S. We have offices in Europe, in the Midwest, in the West Coast. We have offices in Asia, and there's different focus areas, but about 85 to 90% of our global work is in what we would consider healthcare. So the East Coast is very heavily that way. And so when I spend time with my clients, I'm sort of the representative of ZS, if you will, right? So if I'm a client, they tap into me for a lot of really interesting insight into the industry, for solving their specific problems, for knowing them, right? My team's the same way. But they also rely on me for bringing the best of what ZS has, because I can't be an expert in everything, right? The breadth of what we do, right, is really wide. So we've touched almost every aspect of a pharmaceutical organization, almost every aspect of any client organization, even outside of pharma. About, I would say, 5 to 7 years ago, if you asked anybody at ZS, what is sort of your core identity, we would say that we're experts in sales and marketing-based issues. Okay? And we are an expertise-based consultancy, but our expertise has grown a lot. So we actually have started to kind of move a little bit away from that, and really focus more just on impact, right? How do we have the biggest impact on our clients and our client organizations? And a lot of that, of course, is based on sort of the discipline we bring, the expertise that we bring in sales and marketing-based issues, especially in healthcare. But we've now integrated into things like research and development on the clinical side, patient side. We've worked in supply chain, we've worked in technology. And so if somebody says, really, what's the differentiating factor for ZS, it really is that expertise, but it's also that we work from strategy all the way down to implementation and operations. So we'll work on high-level strategy projects. Let me give a couple examples. I'm working right now with a client on a commercial data warehouse for their entire pharmaceutical organization. They had a previous vendor. Things weren't going well with quality. They weren't doing well in terms of the service level, but they also weren't bringing the right discipline of connecting the dots between what goes in from data, but also what comes out from insight and action, right? And so they went to RFP, or request for proposal, and so it was competitive. But we also ultimately wound up winning against a number of competitors, and we're in the process of getting ready, very close in the next couple weeks, to go live across basically building and implementing their commercial data warehouse, right? Focused on also their end user reporting or business intelligence, and then everything that goes around from a commercial analytics standpoint. Who are the right customers? How do we establish what in pharma we call a call plan, right, or a target universe, and give guidance to their field sales in terms of how they go to their customers, how frequently they go to their customers. What do their geographic territories for their sales force, what does that look like? What does the incentive compensation, so for a sales team, right, the reps, the representatives that are out there in the field have their salary, but they also have a variable portion of their bonus plan. And we help them design what that looks like. We also then take that to operations. So we will be operating all of that, including the daily refreshes of all of their data, the daily refreshes of all the reports, the weekly piece of that, managing on a monthly basis the actual calculation of those payouts for their representatives. So you see, it's a pretty wide span of what we do. And again, it's guiding them on the strategy of how to do it best and implementing and establishing high quality operations that help them actually administer all of that work. Okay? And so that's one example of what we do in terms of the breadth of what we do. But I have also worked on things like, physician market research, right? What does a good market research plan look like? And why are we doing market research? What's the strategy that we're trying to define? How do we understand perspectives from our customers? How do we understand perspectives from patients in different ways? And then how do we help our clients take research like that and turn it into actionable insight, if you want to create more buzzwords that get thrown around in textbooks. But it's important, right? Because it's not just about what comes out of it, but it's about what they do with it, right? And again, if I think about the differentiating factor for CS, it's really about understanding all of those components so that we're not just building something that's going to sit in a binder on a shelf. That, to me, personally, and for us as an organization, but I'll speak to me personally, is the most frustrating thing. I've been a part of that in past experiences. You don't want to build something that a client says, this looks great. You want to build something that creates impact so that when they turn around, they say, that worked out really great, right? That helped us grow our brands. It helped us grow our people. It helped us grow our organization. And so that's the impact that we're trying to drive. So I'm going to stop there for a second. I can talk a little bit about my role specifically with ZS, but let me stop for a second and see what kind of questions you guys have, because I do want to spend more of the time focused on you guys. So much here. Yeah, thank you.
Could you talk just a little bit about maybe an entry-level position, what the day-to-day would be in that position?
That's a great question. So the day-to-day role. So we went at CS, so we hire almost at all levels right now. If I think about sort of university hiring, we hire from undergrad at what we consider our associate level. So we're not a very sort of hierarchical organization, right? We're very flat. We don't really have those same norms. We don't have bosses, right? It's teams, right? And so our undergraduates come in at the associate level. So we have associates, then either from a PhD program sometimes, or through promotion, there's an associate consultant layer. Consultants, which are, again, either promoted or hired in from MBA programs. And then we have managers, associate principals, and principals. Okay, so again, not a ton of levels. We have a lot of different tracks in there based on focus areas. So our undergraduates are hired at the associate level. So let me kind of talk a little bit about the day-to-day life for our associates. Our associates, again, some may focus more on decision analytics, so more of the statistics and algorithms and maths and analytics that go into the work that we do. Some may come in more on the sort of broader sales and marketing excellence, or what you would consider sort of a generalist. In either case, the projects that you might work on would look similar to kind of what I described, right? And it could be anything. It could be working on a development of a targeting strategy for customer targeting. It could be working on market research. It could be working on a bigger technology strategy. It could be working on any number of things from strategy to operations. Okay? And so when you're an associate coming into the firm, the team structure around you is very important. Right? And so that team structure is, again, like most good consulting answers, the answer is always it depends, right? So it really depends on the type of project that you're working on. But I've had projects where it's been myself, even as a principal, and one associate. I've had projects where we've got a 50-person team, including 20 or 30 people in our India offices doing work. And so we do really operate a global operating model. So our associates are a part of that team, and a big part of that team. So on any given day, the work that you do will vary. It may be things like running data and analytics and developing algorithms to help sort of foster decision making. It may be on operations, things like running already predefined calculations to determine, like I said, for incentive comp, output of payouts for sales reps. It may be looking at inputs that might go into defining a strategy for how you might align sales geographies or territories, and working directly with the client as well. Right? One of the things that I think is really nice about ZS is that we're not the type of firm where you have a set number of years before you start to get client interaction. Right? We have new associates that get client-facing opportunities. A lot of that is sort of the take the bull by the horns mentality. Right? If you're good at what you do and you can demonstrate capability, we would love to have you be in front of clients. Now, you may not present to the board in your first day, right? But you will have the opportunity to experience it from the client side by interacting with the client team. And that's an important factor of growth and development, right? Sitting back in the office only and running what somebody tells you to run is not an effective use of the people and the talent that we like to bring in. We want people to be really strong and productive parts of our team at all levels. So the associates are working side by side with the team, understanding the client strategy, understanding the client needs, helping to define what that looks like. A lot of it is because a lot of what we do is really based heavily in sort of what I would consider analytics. It's a dangerous word because it has a lot of preconceived notions of what it actually is, but that analytic nature, right? A lot of our associates are involved in running, whether it's Excel models or SAS models, to develop any kind of algorithmic output that supports that decision making. But you're involved in client and team meetings. You're involved in collaborative sessions. Our associates get involved in internal innovation. It really does depend on the types of things that you're intrigued and interested to do. One thing I will address is that we often get asked is, what does the staffing model look like, especially for new associates, right? And so we have a variety of staffing coordinators that work directly with project and client leads like myself to define what are the needs that we have for any specific client team or project, and align skills and capabilities of our people and desires of our people to be on those projects. Of course, like, again, with any consulting project and staffing situation, it's a matching problem, right? So you may have all the desire in the world to work on a project that I have and that we just sold, but you may already be committed to another project. So again, we'll keep an eye on that so that there's other opportunities for those type of people, but again, it's a matter of capacity as well. So it's not always a perfect match of, I want to do that, so let's put you on that. But we do take a lot of care because, again, we're talking about the people being our biggest asset. If we don't try and continue to grow and develop people along a development cycle and development plan that's consistent with your desires, then ultimately you're going to leave, right? And that's not good for either of us. So we want to foster that with our people, and so we try really hard to match the type of work we desire to do and the skills and capabilities that we want to achieve with the projects that are available. Yeah.
When I have more seasoned employees, such as second level, things that are associate consultant, and they will
Yep.
another field, are you looking for people specific to industries, to the pharma?
It's a great question.
Or
Yep.
for other skill sets? Talk a little about that.
I can. So when we look at experienced hires, actually, let me kind of take it from the standpoint of when we look at any of our hires, but especially as we're looking at our more experienced hires that will have some industry experience or some experience before, during, or after the program. Right? So take, for example, an MBA hire at our consultant level that comes in usually with somewhere between 3, 5, or more years of experience before they matriculate into the MBA program. The sort of blunt answer is no. We don't have criteria that says you should come in with consulting experience, or you should come in even with business experience. Right? There are a lot of skills and capabilities that we can train towards. I can teach you about the pharmaceutical industry. I can teach you about all of our practice areas and how to manage projects in that way. The biggest thing that I can't teach people that we look for in a lot of our recruiting is how do you think, right? Are you an analytic thinker, right? Doesn't even mean that you always have to have all the experience of running algorithms and models, but are you an analytic thinker? Can you take an unstructured problem and create structure and frameworks around it that allow us to think through various angles and dimensions with our clients that ultimately create impact, right? And so that is a very difficult thing to just flat out teach someone. And so that's actually, as I was talking about some of the diversity of the people that we have, that's the biggest thing in my mind, right? When you look at the disciplines that come into the firm, whether it's from business school or undergraduate business programs, a lot of our folks come from science and engineering. And that's because they come in with that analytic rigor, they come in with the structured and disciplined thinking. And a lot of times, when you match that with folks that come in with less structured, the business backgrounds, or even some of your liberal arts types of backgrounds, you put those two together and you've got people that sort of the left brain, right brain thinking, right? And when you put it all together in a firm like that, you really can create some really cool collaboration models. We have, we even more recently started to realize that we had this need where so here's an example of a project that we're doing in the industry with a number of different organizations, what we call patient journey development, okay? So if you think about, a patient, right? And so for me, I also head up, you mentioned that I run our Philadelphia office, which is true, so I'm an office managing principal for Philadelphia, about 140 people in Philly. Another role that I have within CS is I lead our Rare Disease Center of Excellence. So all the work that we do with pharmaceutical companies and products that are focused on small patient populations. A lot of them are genetic diseases. I can talk more about that probably for hours if you want on the side. But the point being that, especially in those cases, we work with a lot of our clients to understand what does the patient go through, right, before they have an effective diagnosis, which in rare disease is very difficult to get a diagnosis because they're rare. A lot of doctors don't see these types of patients, don't see these diseases, sometimes don't even know about them. So the patients and their families and caregivers, they touch a lot of different stakeholders, they do a lot of research, they get tested on a lot of different things, a lot of different products and therapies that they try. various side effects. So what is the journey by which the patients and their families go through, leading up to treatment, successful treatment, unsuccessful treatment? And the reason that that's important to map out is because it provides clues into how a pharmaceutical organization can interact with the various stakeholders to best meet the support needs of the patient. Okay? And so those can be major differentiating factors for a pharma company. In light of competition, right? If there's one competitor on the market, you have to do something differentiated. And in, if it's not your pill or your drug, then you have to have support models that do that, and support models only work if you're actually supporting the patients and their families, right? So we do a lot of market research to develop these patient journeys, right? We do qualitative and quantitative market research with doctors, with patients, with patient advocacy groups. We do a lot of interviews with industry-leading experts. We do a lot of desk research, and ultimately develop the patient journey. So back to the point that I was making earlier about differences in diversity of skills, we realized that there's a huge impact by being more creative with that. Well, being CS and being very analytically focused for 35 years, right, it really took a lot to break down the norms to say, what does that mean for us? And so now we actually have a team of, I believe it's about 15 or 16 specific people that we hired with experience and expertise in creativity and development, creativity and design. So our creative and design team brings discipline to these types of projects where we can really think outside of our norms, think outside of the quantitative and qualitative market research, and even design them in very unique ways that create impact for patients or for our clients, how they share that with doctors, how they share that with patients. And so that's an example of a project where, it combines these different types of skills. And so we're always looking for differences in skills, diversity in backgrounds, because we find opportunities out of that that don't exist if we're always hiring the same type of profile.
We're talking earlier on about overview of design planning all the way up to implementation.
Yep.
How does post-evaluation come into the RFP, especially in the rare disease spectrum? Is there a good time frame that's given by the firm?
Post-evaluation of what specifically?
Of the recommendation.
Oh, of our recommendation. So, okay, so if I can repackage your question a little bit, tell me if I hit it right. Is basically, once we do something with a client, how do we evaluate and assess the impact that we had so that we make sure that we are sticky with our clients, right? And so that's a big part of it, right? When we think about the types of clients that we have, 85% of our business is in pharma. We touch a couple hundred different firms in any given year, but a lot of what we do comes back to the 98 or 99 out of the top 100 pharmaceutical companies that we have consistent work with on an annual basis, right? So if we weren't creating that impact, they certainly wouldn't want us to do more work. But that said, it is very introspective to take a look and sit back after a project and say, did we accomplish what we intended to, right? A lot of times our clients kind of demand it, right? Because that's how they operate. A lot of times it's on us though, because we do so many different things, right? So this year I'm a global client for one of our top, I guess it's about top 20 clients. And so I don't do all the work. I coordinate with the various principals and managers within the firm that do all that work. I do some of it. But we have probably executed 150, 200 projects this year alone. And so not everyone will we look at from that standpoint, but we'll do two things. Larger initiatives, it's become somewhat abundantly clear whether it's working or not, right? By working both side by side with the client as much as we do. Smaller projects, we do take a look and we step back and say, if we're going to, let me give a better example of this, right? So let's say that we were helping to determine the size of a sales force for our client. Right? This is something we've done 3 times for different sales forces for this one client. We're actually involved in 2 more of these right now. There's a lot that goes into it. I'll leave that aside, the details, but it's both analytic as well as strategic. And so the output of that is the optimal size of their sales force. How many people? Right? And so let's make something up. Let's call it 200. Right? Well, if we help them design the sales force, 200 people, we've done all the analytics to say that's the right number. Right? We've done all the work to say this is how you lay them out geographically across the U.S. Right? And so then they start executing. Well, if they start calling us in 2 months and saying these are the issues that we're starting to see, that's a problem. We tend to like to be very heavily involved in our clients, and from a relationship standpoint, it's really imperative to have both senior level relationships as well as junior level relationships with your clients across the board so that you understand very, very rapidly the situation on the ground, right? How is it going? What's the execution? What's the field saying? What's the field leadership saying? How are they hitting it with regards to their strategy? Are they making an impact with their customers? And so oftentimes, whether through the course of work that we're doing or separate from that to just assess the impact, we will look at how well was this recommendation. It helps us inform the next time that the client comes to us. It helps us keep the client looking ahead proactively about changes that they might need to make. And so we are very aware of that, and it is something that we take very seriously because the last thing that you want is the client to call you and say, hey, this was great, but you missed it by 50%, and now we've overspent, or we've underspent, and we're missing opportunities in the market. And so I think a lot of it comes from the relationships that we have. And again, that's part of good consulting relationships with your clients is knowing them personally and professionally, right? So if I have an example where I have a client who's the head of a global franchise for a top 15 pharmaceutical company, right? And so he runs basically, in essence, you can almost consider him like the general manager of what is in essence a several billion-dollar business, okay? And so he and I spend a lot of time just talking about his business, right? That's not me selling anything, right? If I was in there selling every day, he would kick me out, right? It's not me selling anything. It's me getting to know him personally. It's me getting to know his business so that I can make that assessment in a better way. Because sometimes that assessment is also about, is it hitting the nail on the head strategically, which is hard. It's not always a quantitative measure, right? But the other big thing, especially in terms of consulting relationships, is that it's about them personally, right? And this is probably what I would say that I enjoy most at this point in my career, right? Is building those relationships. The delivery of good work, that's a foundation, right? If my teams don't deliver good work, this person's not going to talk, right? But when we talk, I want to know what are his personal objectives? What is he trying to achieve in his organization? How can I help him, if it's the right thing to do for the organization, achieve his goals, right? And that actually gets into when you build good consulting relationships or good relationships in general, when they leave an organization or they're looking to make another move, I've helped many of my clients find another job, right? Get placed into another organization at senior levels, identify good opportunities. I've had a client who's now the president of a pharmaceutical startup pharmaceutical company. When he left his prior organization as a executive VP, he and I sat down to lunch. And again, he wasn't even a part of the company, so I wasn't trying to sell him anything for sure. And we spent several lunches focused on what is important to him, right? What's he trying to do next? What does he want to do? And so that brainstorming and collaboration, right? This is all part of what makes good consultants, right? Being aware of how you can deliver successfully, right, in the type of work that you do, and how you interact with people because it's a people game. Like most businesses, it's a relationship play. Okay, and building a good relationship doesn't mean that I'm going to take a client out golfing and we're going to solve all the world's problems, right? It also doesn't mean that I'm going to take a client golfing and then all of a sudden, because we went golfing, he's going to call me and say, hey, I have these great projects to do, right? Building good relationships is about building trust, right? And so that when a client wants to engage in some work or just have a thought partner to talk to, they will pick up the phone and call the person that they trust the most. And so as you grow in your career as a consultant, that's ultimately what you want to achieve. You want to be a trusted partner to your clients. And that's how you create impact for them personally and through the organization. And that's what will ultimately get them to want to purchase services from you because they know they can trust you. If something were to go wrong, things go wrong all the time. Right? We do these big operational projects. Things go wrong. Right? When you work with millions and millions of records of data, no matter how much quality control you put into it, something will go wrong. It's not a good thing. We've all been there. You guys have probably been there in your careers, or whether it's in school, right? When you make a mistake, those things, they kind of hit you in the gut, right? But the key is, if you build good relationships with your clients, if you do good work consistently, the question is, how do you then recover? How do you make sure it doesn't happen again? And so a lot of that is what goes into it, but you can't really, it's a non-starter to have that conversation if your clients don't trust you.
How do you see the challenges concerning the startup as it is large firm?
Yeah, Great question. Startup versus large pharma. The reason I like startup pharma is because all these good things I've said about relationship development and impact on people are very hard when you're sitting across the table from somebody that even though they know they can make the decision, there's 20 people below them and 20 people above them, and everybody's got to make approvals and all these things. And it's just a very different bureaucracy and mentality. Can you make impact? For sure. Do we? Absolutely. But for me, I love the impact of the small organization because here's the big difference. Most of the people you come in contact with at a startup wear multiple hats, right? So the person who is, this is an example where I was working with a guy who is the head of commercial, but he's also helping stand up their managed markets group, which is the group that deals with all of the commercial payers and the government, right? Those are very different things to deal with on a day-to-day basis, right? Which has got to just be amazing for this guy to have to turn that crank in his head and say, I'm going to focus here, and then on the other side of the world, in some cases, you know, in the same hour. And so it's actually really fun to help those types of people, right? It's fun to help those types of organizations, and the sort of ability to make an impact when resources are limited is there, right? As a consultant, right? Part of what we can do is bring good people to the organization that have good experience, that have good ability to analytically think and drive decision making, and help them sort of create the horsepower that's necessary to do all the work. In startup pharma, that's a huge need. And so I worked with a client down here in Philly. When I met them, they were about 10 people. And at the time, this is a case where the first discussion that we had didn't lead to work. They asked us, they knew had a relationship with, pharma is a very weird world because it's a very, very large organization that feels very, very small. People move around a lot. So I almost never sat in a meeting where I didn't either know somebody or they didn't know of us, right? And it's, so it also is a very, very good case and reason to remember that you should never burn bridges, right? Because people will always come back. But so they had 10 people, and the first discussion we had, they wanted to talk, they knew somebody at ZS, they called us. I got involved because they were local to Philly, and they said, we want to talk about customer segmentation. We want to do a customer segmentation. We're a couple years out from the launch of development of our first product in pharma. And so we went, we pitched them. We have very, very good segmentation capabilities. We told them everything that we do. We told them how we would do it. The problem was budget. They didn't have the budget to both purchase the data that they had a need for and do the work. And so they found a vendor that was willing to give some of that for free that we couldn't do. I can't compete with free. So they did that work. But I stayed in touch with them, and I ultimately got a call from when they hired a senior vice president of commercial. He knew of us. I got in touch with him, and we started just talking. Right? We talked about capability. And so this is an example of that relationship, and then starting to stage the projects, right, very carefully, led to several $1 million worth of business over time for us. But the key and the big difference is that you have to be willing to recognize, and this is actually key in both areas, you have to be willing and able to recognize that this isn't about me. It's not about ZS, it's about our clients. Right? The spotlight has to be on them. And so in this case with that company, the spotlight, when I put it on them, says, you know what, it's okay if we only sell this first project as a $7,500 project to quickly do an assessment for them, right? And we did. And we did it with the same level of intensity, the same level of quality that we would have done, you know, a $75,000 project or a $7 million project, right? Why? Because that was what was important to them, and that was what was going to create impact for them. And that starts you off on the right foot because they want, again, it comes back to trust, right? It comes back to trust, it comes back to integrity. And so when we do these types of projects, you know, that's not just the integrity of the firm, it's integrity for me personally, right? And so it was very important to get off on that right foot. When you deal with larger clients, now in our case, because at least in pharma, we're so well entrenched in the industry, and we sit at sort of the domain expertise with our industry, you know, large pharma, the Pfizers of the world, BMSs of the world, those types of companies, they know us, we work with them so consistently every year that it doesn't require them, right? They have bigger budgets, right? Again, you have to manage those budgets because some specific functions might not, and you know, overcharging is not an option, right? Again, the stickiness and sustainability with clients over time, if I overcharge a client, they will figure it out, and then we won't be doing work with them, right? It's as simple as that, right? It's not a matter of I can't really hide in the business world. At some point, somebody will figure it out, and then you lose all of your integrity, right? And so the difference is both in the way in which you build relationships and sell. The way you deliver is probably similar, but again, projects tend to be larger, their needs tend to be bigger. But to the real point of what I like most about it is the multiple hats and the way you can make an impact on individual people because of what you're focused on in small farm.
Michael, we have time for one more question.
Excellent, wow, let's go fast.
I have it right.
Yeah. What else can I answer? Yeah.
You mentioned most of your clients are pharma. Do you have other clients within life sciences or even outside?
We do. So we do work in providers, so your healthcare systems. We do work with payers, so your commercial payers, your Aetnas, Blue Crosses, things like that. Pretty much anything in healthcare, large healthcare institutions and systems. We are doing work peripheral to pharma, trying to figure out what does the healthcare ecosystem look like, and what are the changes that are so uncertain right now, whether it's because of government policy that is changing, the healthcare landscape that is changing, the types of drugs that are coming to market, right, with biosimilars, with gene therapy, more in the space of rare disease and oncology. All those things, the cost of those drugs change the way in which the healthcare landscape changes. So impact both pharma and the patients and the broader healthcare landscape. We also do, we do work outside of pharma. So the other 15%, we do a lot of work in things like transportation, travel and leisure. We do work in durable goods, high tech. For us, the key is not about how many different industries we work in. Again, thinking about organic growth, right? It's how do we make sure that we extend what we do really, really well into other industries? Because if we don't feel that we can do that, then we're just soiling our own reputation by trying to grow unnecessarily. So all of the plays that we make are because we've hired people in from other industries, or we've looked at other industries and said, this type of practice area or capability or analytic nature of what we do would extend really well, and then we're able to start to build that type of business. But it's really kind of fundamentally based on, can we do it and can we do it really well?
Well, I want to thank Michael so much for your time.
Yeah.